We're doing 140 miles an hour right now, right? You just don't really feel it. Hi guys, Tab here. I hope you're all keeping well. Very excited to be back on the channel this week with two very special EVs. One for comfort and luxury and one for sports silliness. They're both well over 100k, so each of these in its own right is a significant investment. But we're going to be getting out in both of these and comparing just how they operate as an EV when you're out and about on the roads, and which one is going to suit your use case if you're lucky enough and fortunate enough to be spending this much on an EV. This one is owned by Keith. He's been on the channel before. He went out in the e-tron, the RS variant of that, same platform as this incidentally, and that was a very, very impressive bit of kit too. So he's very kindly coming out with us today in this, just to kind of talk through it. And we're going to get some real-world conversation going about what it's like to own these. As you know, this one's mine, if you watch the channel. And looking at these cars, they are both very sleek, and that is a common occurrence with EVs these days. They are designed to be as aerodynamic as possible. This one trumps this one. This one has a drag coefficient of 0.2, and this is 0.22. You'll notice that this is, it seems narrower when you look at it on the road to cut through the air even more. And of course, one area this one will completely trump this one is on the range. I think the range of this one in a real world driving scenario is pretty much going to be double. So anyway, without further ado, let's get out in them and see what they're all about. That's it, I think. Okay, so the reality is this is an S-Class Mercedes, and most people with one of these are going to be chauffeured around in the rear. And the rear of this thing is absolutely on another level. It's like a bit of a hotel. Seat adjustment, seat cooling, seat heating, and a detachable tablet for you to play with whilst you're cruising about. Although, how you get it out is another question. Look, it seems to have presented itself there. So I can now, whilst I'm being driven around, play with the settings and annoy the chauffeur. But yeah, really impressive. And the seats are super comfortable, really light and airy with these dual sunroofs as well. So absolutely lovely place to be. But I don't want to do the video from the back. I'm going to get in the front and we'll carry on there. Right, we are out and about in the EQS, and the first thing that strikes you about this car is the level of luxury. It is absolutely stunning, and it's so comfortable. The ride in this thing, it's almost like you're sailing, not so much being driven. So already you could probably ask, well, why is he comparing an EQS, which is the Mercedes S-Class in an electric capacity, to the Porsche Taycan, which is a completely different car? Well, to be honest, it's probably not the fairest comparison, but it's what we've got. They're both pretty expensive. They're both relatively new EVs. The Taycan's been around for a while. This is much newer. But just kind of to give you guys a handle on what you really want out of an EV when you're thinking about buying one, because there is an EV out there, I think, for most people, for the majority of people, depending on your use cases. So, Keith, you've been thinking and looking at EVs, and you had deposits down, you looked at the e-tron, you eventually settled on this.
Well, I've got this and the ID3. So I've got the ID3 is the runabout, which I use most of the time.
Yeah.
Go down to supermarket or whatever. There's no point in using something like this.
Gotcha.
But as you know, my hobby is golf.
Yes, it is.
As it may be a bit obvious as well from the moment. But the reality is that if you want to go to some of the clubs that I go to, which are 100 miles away, I wouldn't be able to use the EV.
Right, the ID3 that is.
So the ID3. I mean, the simplest thing is that it does not have the range. It says it will do for 240 miles, and it won't.
It won't do anywhere near that. Yeah.
Well, certainly not on a hot day when you're using aircon, whatever it is. So I was got more into understanding through owning, and also with Audi being completely and utterly, I'll be polite to them, problematical, where after a year they still didn't have a delivery date for my car. I said, take it, I'm not interested. The next week, they opened up the order book for the EQS, and I bought it sight unseen, because what they're promising
was pretty good.
450 mile range.
Yeah, which is next level, isn't it?
It's the next level.
So let's talk about how it does it. So the Taycan Turbo S, which I've got, the real world range in that's probably about 220-ish, right? But the PCM, which is the Porsche Communications Management System, is pretty accurate. It's renowned for being pretty honest, pretty true, versus one that might massively overestimate the range. An interesting fact, the first Tesla Roadster that Elon put together, that had a claim range of about 240, I believe, but real world people were only getting about 100 in normal use, which is a massive disparity between what's quoted and what you're actually getting. So far, I mean, the range of this is massive, and the way it gets there is because it's got a 108 kilowatt hour battery, which is huge. One of the biggest out there you can get on an EV at the moment. It's very efficient. It's not super powerful in the grand scheme of things. I think 245 kilowatts, 333 brake horsepower. So, enough, but it's all about the torque figure in these anyway. So it's so comfortable though. I just can't stop talking about how comfortable it is. It just floats around like nothing else. No cracks, no rattles, really forgiving suspension. And of course you'd expect that in the S-Class luxury limo that this is. So how's the range working out for you so far, Keith? Would you say
it actually is, because I mean it was initially delivered down from Harrogate, and they charged it fully. And when they handed it over to me, because it's 250 miles or whatever it is, there was 170 miles still on the battery.
Right.
So you're definitely looking at, even on motorway traffic, etc., that sort of mileage.
Right. Yeah.
Again, while we're talking EVs, I've now got this one set up as they recommend, so only 80% of charge, so I'm going to get something like 360, and then you get the adjustments for, if it's going to be really hot, it will lose a little bit or whatever. Yeah. But this one seems to be an awful lot more accurate.
Good.
The ID3 has, on one occasion, I drove 15 miles and it took 32 miles of battery.
Wow.
Because I booted it a little bit and it was very, very, very warm.
So that's really quite a surprise to hear VW misquoting their figures, right?
Well, I don't know, it's misquoted.
The emission scandal to ring a bell or two, but there you go. So this seems to be holding out pretty well at the moment, which is great. And I'll have to in fact, I'm just going to get the mobile phone out now. We've got to talk about the party piece in this car, and it's the dash. The dash in this is like something I've never seen. It is genuinely like a spaceship. The size, you can see there, the size of the central screen, and there's a person's arms for real world comparison, but it's absolutely huge, and it's called what, the Hyperscreen?
Hyperscreen.
And to be fair, it's had a bit of a learning curve, right? And I looked at this and I was a bit overwhelmed too to begin with, because there's a lot of options. How are you getting on with that?
Slowly.
Slowly.
To be fair, I mean, an hour or so to show you around this is just not going to work. You really need to do the course you need to understand an awful lot more about what it is, because there is something new that happens, as you saw today. I mean, 360-degree rotation of your parking images. Just unbelievable. There's just so much tech.
Yeah, it's very clever, and you can change things like the ambient lighting, and the sat-nav will actually overlay directions in an augmented reality style, if I can use that. It will present you with augmented reality directions on the video camera when you need to turn left and right. So that's almost idiot-proof. Another really nice feature about this is just how light and airy it is inside, right? Aircon working really nicely. You've got these lovely dual sunroofs here that we saw from the back, and it just gives it a nice, comfortable, relaxing position in terms of the driving experience. So they've clearly thought about that.
And that's what it is. I mean, this is one of the worst roads around here, right?
Yeah.
It literally terrible road, and you're just floating over it. And it's eating it up as if it really wasn't there. So you can charge this, I believe, at about 200 kilowatts is the fastest rate of charge it will accept. If only you could do that at home.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to do that at home. It'd be very, very convenient. But
you and I need to get together and make sure we get a three-phase into the house.
Yeah, exactly right. That would increase times a little bit. So we'll touch on charging in a bit more detail now, I think. So you're charging to 80%, right?
To charge it to 80% of the go, that's the optimal.
Why are you doing that? Why have you decided
it's the optimal, and they call it also, I've got it on eco charging, because that's the way you look after the battery most. Because battery is a bit like heart. You only got so many heartbeats. Battery, you can only charge it so many times. I think most of us have seen a famous fruit-flavoured phone or pad of some sort of description that after a year or so tends to lose its charge a lot quicker.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be the same for cars, and that's why the manufacturers recommend that you only charge to 80% as normal.
Right, so that is guidance that I've seen countless times as well. And to that end, theoretically, you should only ever charge any lithium-ion device to 80%, including your phone. But I definitely don't do that. And in my Taycan, I don't charge it to 80%. I charge it to full whenever I charge it. And the reason I do that is because the mileage that you get out of a single charge is already pretty low. Now, I probably need to consider why I'm doing this. But the thought process I've got is I do know that manufacturers put reserve capacity in their lithium-ion battery packs for cars. So whereas this is quoted 108, I believe it's probably closer to about 115, 116 in available, well, sorry, not available, but capacity that is there that the computer can bring into use when the battery starts to degrade over time, as they all do. So the thing is, I don't think, the way I think about it, Keith, is manufacturers, would they give you the option to charge to 100% if it was going to break it? Why would they not make the 80% 100%?
Yeah, I get that. And I guess like most people, I think I said it on your last video, EV, experimental vehicles. We're the guinea pigs for people who essentially want to be at the cutting edge of technologies, and you live and die by it, so to speak. This to me would make perfect sense if you did run it to 100, and the other thing, depending on how selfish you are as an individual, but from what I understand, if you're not going to keep the car more than 5 or 6 years, which is highly likely, then 5 or 6 years your battery is going to last. So you could easily charge it to 100% and just say, it's not your problem. To me, the car distance, 400 miles, 350 miles, that will get me to most places I want to go and back.
it is an absolutely bonkers range on an EV, and that's what they set out to do. So there's also the Mercedes EQXX, which is a prototype car. They're flying around at the moment, and that's getting about 750 miles, I believe, out of the single
1,000 kilometres.
Yeah, which is insanity, next level. And we're just going to see continuous improvement in this space. We've got to remember EVs are still relatively new, but the battery capacity is something that is probably the biggest fear factor that people consider when moving to an EV, is that range anxiety, that battery capacity. And we're still on very old, dated lithium-ion technology. I think we're still waiting for that nirvana, right? When there is something else that's released where we can solid state. There's conversations around that. I know Porsche are looking at solid state. But yeah, all these new technologies that potentially could come out of the woodwork that's going to really make your EV life easier. So.
But at 350 to 400 mile range, there's no anxiety for me whatsoever. The main anxiety is where and how do you get the charger network. So next week I'm going to Turnberry to play golf.
Right.
It's
watch out Turnberry.
450 miles. So how do I find somewhere along the route that's got 150 plus charger, so I can charge it overnight, and I've got the car recharged completely by the morning?
Yeah, exactly. It's all things that you need to consider when looking to charge an EV and to drive an EV on long distances. Now, we'll cover it when we get in the Porsche a little bit, but the PCM's pretty good about calculating a route whereby you can charge on the way. Now, the other thing that you've got to consider is you might get to a charge point that simply isn't working, right, which a lot of people experience these days. Or busy. So you're in a queue. So in terms of party pieces, anything else that it does that you found out?
Well, I would say in video where they play the video from the front cameras over on the traffic guidance or the route guidance is good. The fact that it will show you traffic lights when you're coming up to a traffic lights and it presents this again. Those I think are kind of really cute things that I didn't know and hadn't expected to be quite as good as it is. But the biggest thing I think is the rear-wheel steering. Right. For a big heavy car, and having been a big heavy car user for a long time, I'm used to it being more like a boat when you go round corners or when you reverse or whatever it is. This thing's so agile. It just drives beautifully, really drives beautifully, and I think it would be a shame to be sitting in the back to well, again, I think I like driving cars, but the reality is it would be a shame to be driving in the back of a car that is as comfortable as this and as nice to drive. Yeah,
I think for me, the one thing that I've noticed that this and the Taycan share in common is when they come to a complete stop, because obviously it's an EV, it's heavy, it uses regen a lot of the time as well, right? And it just has this kind of weird rocking, almost dull, dead sensation when it comes to a dead stop, and that's something that I think is consistent just due to the weight, but it's only a minor, isn't it? You really have to push. In terms of the steering feedback, Phil?
I think it's perfect, absolutely perfect. It's light, which feels much lighter for a heavy car. But you certainly don't feel it on the corners. You certainly don't feel it on any of those other things. That you've got this dead weight that's going round, and the way it is.
So your overall experience of now having owned this for how long?
A month now.
A month. It's pretty good.
It's absolutely good. I mean, better than expected. If I really have to tell the truth, it's much better than expected. I had no idea that because again the car was bought effectively unseen.
Bought from plan almost.
Buy off plan. If you want to get it inside a year, that's what you have to do. But realistically, the car has been a surprise to me. One, that it's genuinely got the distance, and it's got the comfort, as you so rightfully say. It's an extremely comfortable and extremely quiet car. Listen, there's no noise. Absolutely noiseless.
That's one thing I meant to touch on in this thing. It's probably one of the quietest cars I've ever been in terms of cabin noise. And from the outside as well, you just don't hear a thing when this thing floats past. It has got a mode to put it into dynamic and give you a bit more noise, but even that is as quiet as a mouse, I think. So it is by far one of the quietest cars I've ever experienced. It's almost a bit ghostly in a way, but in a good way, if that's what you're after. I noticed there you've got on the screen, you've got the charge there saying max 316 right now, and then the battery 265, sorry. So that is when you need to charge it based on your profile.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
So
you'll get 80-20 you're doing, I guess.
I think a little bit is that I'm probably not the nicest person to drive an EV.
Right.
Considering it is a fairly big, heavy car, I like to get up to speed as reasonably fast as I can and keep up with speed limits, etc.
Yeah. We're doing 140 miles an hour right now, right? You just don't really feel it. We're not doing that, but. And of course, as the passenger in this, you get your own screen, which you can just turn on like that, and then you get the ability to just kind of play around, I think.
You can have your own phone, have your own connection, have your own music.
Look at that. Tells me, as a passenger, if I need to be worried about your range. At the moment, I don't think so. It's looking pretty full. But yeah, the available options I've got here, very impressive. And it's a very responsive system. Very smooth, very slick. Having a look there. Navigation, can get another map up. So more maps than you could ever imagine, right?
I think the reality is that Mercedes have done a number here where they've been playing with all the new tech that they probably could and ram it into the car.
This is quite an interesting one. It's showing you there the energy flow, so you can see whether you're taking energy out the batteries or under braking if you're recuperating. There you go, recuperation. And you'll notice there only one motor in this car, rear-wheel drive only. Obviously that's where the range is good. So yeah, it's very clever stuff, isn't it? And this is quite an impressive screen as well. It tells you what all the dampers are doing independently there, how the roll of the car is, how much accelerator you're using, how much brake. So you can see all the activity which is taking place behind the scenes in order to keep this car as smooth as possible for the occupants.
If only they had a driver that cared.
Yeah, that's the thing. So the Mercedes EQ range is pretty big now, right? They've got the EQA, B, C. The E and S in saloon versions, right? Yeah. What the market, I think, is massively lacking right now is two-door performance EV coupe type cars, and I know there's quite a few being worked on, but mine is a saloon. I wish it was a coupe in a way. But the only options you've really got now, if you want a coupe EV, are a Tesla Roadster Model 1, or you can wait for the Model 2, or a Rimac Nevera, which is going to set you back $2 million and is probably a bit unobtainable for most folk. So there's a massive gap right now in the market for that type of EV, and I'm sure we're going to see a huge increase in availability of those as manufacturers jump on that. We all know Porsche are working on the Cayman, right?
Oh.
So you can hear it a bit better.
Sounds like a car.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? So first impressions then, seeing as we're recording it now, you think it's quite comfortable, right?
I do.
Should say, we're out in the Taycan now, obviously. We swap places, swap cars. Letting Keith experience Taycan. You've test driven one before, right? Yeah. You were looking at one of these anyway, but didn't quite pass the golf club test in Ease, did it? So it was kind of ruled out. But your initial impression is comfortable, right?
It's comfortable. It's exceptionally clean. I mean, very, very unfussy, functional, practical. I mean, really, really impressed.
Yeah.
And the quality of everything is really good.
Yeah.
Nicely put together.
The build quality of this is something that I was very impressed with from the get-go. It's just so well put together, so solid. No cracks, no rattles, just like the EQS we've just been in, but very different. When I look down at my range with half a tank of electric juice in there, it says 108 miles, which is very different to what you're going to be seeing in yours.
Well, when I turned it off, with its recuperation, it said 271, and that's 73%.
Wow, yeah, okay. So you've got a lot more range than you get out of this, but we know this is a different car. It's got two motors, both front and rear, 560 kilowatts of EV power, which is pretty insane. So we'll experience how that differs. But what I do like about it is you can just float about effortlessly in town, and it does a really nice job. I mean, I don't think for road fun or road use there is actually a better car than an EV. Right.
Well, I think what you've got is supercar performance, but you've got a lot lower ownership costs.
Yeah.
But also you can use it as a normal daily.
Yeah.
It's certainly not going to be as ridiculous as some supercars with a supercar performance.
Yeah. Where these obviously fall down massively is if you want to go to a track day, because I don't know how they're going to make it work. They need to get fast chargers, rapid chargers, ultra rapid chargers installed at tracks around the UK so people can bring their EVs and track them. Right now, if you want to track an ICE car, you just fill up at their fuel station that they normally have on site and carry on. To plan an EV track day, you're going to have to charge before you go, drive to the track, probably be almost empty by the time you get there, and then do your track day for as long as you can, giving yourself enough charge to go and find a place to charge it. It's all doesn't work, and that's where it really falls down. So if you track a car, you're probably not going to be getting ICE, are you? But it's a very, very comfortable car around town. Now, hopefully when I get out onto the roads a little bit more, we can experience what it's like.
Yeah, but I mean, just sitting here, it's really comfortable. It's for a sports car, and it is a sports car.
Yeah.
I'm quite surprised how everything seems to be in the right place.
Yeah, exactly. It's very intuitive. I mean, probably miss some buttons, right? Because buttons are fun to press. You get the haptic feedback on this, it's very good, but not quite the same as when you've got actual buttons, I think.
Yeah, I like the way on the Mercedes that they've put the controls for the AC and everything else so that you can get to them without going through 15 menus.
Yeah, there's a Tesla there. I'm sure if we were next to them, they'd probably want to race.
Well, they've already lost as far as I'm concerned already.
Yeah. Why?
The only thing that is good about Tesla is the supercharger network.
Yes, which they've opened up for other EVs as well. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did know that, but apparently it's still a bit restricted. But it actually feels the whole time that you're holding back. It's almost as though the car wants to go.
Yeah, it does. So hold on to your hats a little bit here. It's quite good fun, this bit.
You mean don't do a Hannah? Don't you ever do that to me again.
Yeah, pulls quite nicely, doesn't it?
Oasis is a lot better the second time. It's really, really
It's something else, isn't it?
It rips off. It's fabulous.
Yeah. It's like almost being on some kind of roller coaster at the fairground.
Fun fair, yeah.
But that's what I like about it. It can kind of do that, and it handles pretty well going around the corners. So for a 2.2 ton car, they've really thought about that. And
but that's the brand, isn't it? That's what they do. They provide high-end sports cars that perform very well, and the fact that it's an EV, hey.
but yeah, it's instantaneous, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it is just actually really planted. The car does not feel in the least bit unstable, despite the fact you're giving it a kick of juice. What did you lose from your range on that? What did
I think you lose about 1% for every launch. It's not McLaren level, but it's not bad for a 2.2 ton car.
Because that was teetering on the tyres.
Yeah.
How did that feel to you from the old McLaren? Would the McLaren have sat firm and planted?
Yeah, I mean, McLaren versus this round the bend, simply no contest, right? I mean, there's no weight in a McLaren. Weight is the enemy for getting around a corner.
Right.
Because you've got all that inertia wanting to carry on going straight, and you're saying, no, I'd quite like to go around this corner. But the advantage of weight is it will keep the tyre pressed to the road. So that's the whole downforce.
You're not going to lose it.
They want the car to be stuck to the road. But yeah, it's pretty impressive for.
It's a nice place to be.
Yeah,
I mean, even as a passenger, it's a nice place to be.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I'd be quite so comfortable in the back.
Yeah, so we should touch on that. I mean, we should probably summarise and wrap up this video, I think, for today. And we can do so by saying we probably compared two of the most polar opposites you can get in the EV world right now on video at the moment. Probably a bit of an unfair comparison, because it's not really an apples to apples comparison, is it? They both have very specific niches that they are trying to fulfill. The EQS, obviously luxury, comfort, sitting in the rear, being chauffeured around, and probably not even noticing that you're actually on a journey, right? Whereas this, it's more engaging, it's firmer in terms of the ride, but still comfortable, much more powerful, much less range, completely different car. But I think what you've got to consider is the price point of both those. They're still a lot of money. EVs are a lot of money. I think what's an EV6 fully loaded now? 50 grand, which is a lot of money for one of those even. So even base rate EVs are significant investments. And if you've got a lot of money to invest in a car at this level, there is one out there for you. What there isn't is that two-seater coupe EV experience right now, because the battery weight is just going to kill that right now. So
there are no bargains. I mean, it's unlike.
There are no bargains, and EVs, even sort of second hand, they kind of hold their value so well because the lead times of them are so long right now.
Yeah.
They just command such a premium.
Somebody's got an ID3 up for sale. I think it's in Wales for like 20 grand over the
over list.
I mean, so far it's not been sold, and I hope it doesn't. But
you'd be surprised. What is the lead time on an ID3 now? Do you know?
I think they're probably 6 to 12 months, depending on which model and so on.
It's.
But isn't that also true with most cars? I mean, the lead time on all cars now is quite long.
The lead time on any new Porsche, they're saying 18 months, which is nearly 2 years of hanging around. And what do we think, honestly, about the residuals of an EQS versus a Taycan? I mean, Porsche seem to get very lucky with their residuals, right?
Well, lucky and lucky. I mean, the more I practice, the luckier I get, and that's actually the story of Porsche. You know, their cars across the range hold value very well.
Yeah, if you look at the ICE S-classes, though, they tend to be really good second-hand bargains, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Almost any big car is.
Yeah.
You know, when I sold my Audi, which was sort of £75,000.
An A8.
An A8.
Yeah.
£75,000 new.
Yeah.
It'd done 23,000 miles when I sold it, and I got 23 grand for it. So it's whoosh.
Yeah.
Whereas I think because this is an EV, it's going to hold its value for longer.
Same for you. Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. EVs they're going to get more and more demand as people gravitate towards them. They become more accepted. Charging network increases. So, yeah, I think I think
the popularity will go up, and the fact that the servicing is cheaper, the running them is cheaper. It's just a no-brainer on the just pure economy of it.
So if you had to pick between this and EQS, you'd stick EQS anyway?
For me personally, now it would be the EQS, and this would need to have an awful lot more range stuck on it before I would buy it, because again, this actually is less range than the Volkswagen. Yeah,
it's the Achilles heel of the Taycan is the range, absolutely. But you just got to ask yourself the question: is it going to work for me? Right now, this does. I haven't done any long trips yet. I think if I do, I might have slight mild panic.
Okay. So come back and ask me in a week's time when I come back from Turnberry. 900 will be well over 1,000 miles by the time I get back. Road trip in an EV. That will be fun.
Great stuff. Well, Keith, can wrap it up. Really appreciate your time on this. It's been great having your insight as always, and thanks again for letting us out in the EQS. It's quite an impressive bit of kit in terms of the tech.
And thank you. I mean, as I said before, we both seem to have got that interest around EVs, and although you're more traditionally dyed in the wool petrol head with your McLaren and everything else. The fact is, this is a gorgeous car. No question.
I'm definitely warming to the idea of EVs for sure. And this has been a great experiment. Cool. Well, that's it, everyone. Thanks for watching. Do stay safe, stay well. Bye for now, and see you on the next one.